Get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Catherine Zecca. I am a co-chair of the Grants Committee at Many Hands. Also on this webinar is Susan Liss, a co-chair of the Grants Committee. You can't see her right now, but her icon should be at the top of the screen. This is the Many Hands Applicant webinar, and we want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us this morning and for your interest in Many Hands. So the purpose of our webinar this morning is to provide information about Many Hands, to highlight some details about the application process and about our application, and then provide an opportunity for you to ask questions. If you do have any questions, you can pop those in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Please use the Q&A and not the chat, because we'll only be monitoring the Q&A for questions at the end of the webinar. I also want to let everybody know that the session is being recorded, and we will be posting it on the Many Hands website in the next few days. So if you're watching and you want to go over something again, you'll be able to go to the recording. And if you know anyone who had hoped to join and couldn't join, they will be able to watch the recording on the website as well. Okay, so let's start with a brief overview of Many Hands. We at Many Hands are a collective grant-making organization. Our mission is to make a lasting impact on the lives of women, children, and families in socioeconomic need in the greater Washington, D.C. area. Since 2004, we have made more than 50 grants totaling more than $3 million to local organizations. Many Hands is led by a volunteer working board, and our volunteer members drive the grant making process. Our review committees do change every year. So if you have applied before, most of the people who look at your application this year will likely be different than whoever reviewed your application in prior years. We at Many Hands make 4 grants a year. We make 1 grant in each of our 4 focus areas, and those are education, economic empowerment, health, and housing. We award of the 4 grants, one of them is what we call our impact grant, which is $100,000. And the other 3 grants are what we call our partner grants. And the size of those partner grants depends on how much money we raise every year. In the last several years, they've been between $60,000 and $70,000. Last year, the partner grant was $69,000. Much more information about Many Hands, including our prior grantees, and the application process I'll be going over today, is available on our website. And our website is www.manyhandsdc.org. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the grant application and our timeline. The application period for our 2025 grants opens on January 2nd, 2025, and the deadline to submit your application is Friday. I'm sorry, I might have just said that January 2nd was a Friday. That's not right. It opens on January 2nd, 2025, and the deadline to submit your application is Friday, January 17th, 2025 by 11:59 p.m. A preview of the application is available now on our grants management system. So you may review that application now in PDF. You can start collecting the required information. You can start preparing your responses if you want to do that now. We use Foundant as our grants management system. That's how we accept all of our applications. So to submit an application, you will have to create a Foundant account or log into your existing account. With respect to Foundant accounts, the Foundant account is specific to Many Hands. So if you've applied for a Many Hands grant before, and you should have an account, and you can use that account again. If you have an account on Foundant because you applied for a grant with a different grant maker, you'll need to create a separate account for the Many Hands application. And also each person using Foundant should have their own account, so we can have you can have multiple accounts for people within your organization. So if you have an ED and a development director and you each want to have a login, you should each create your own login. There's no kind of master organization login. And then similarly, if you are a new development director and your prior development director had an account with their email, you should go ahead and create an account with your own email now. You should not try to figure out the login from that old email you don't have access to. We are going to later in the webinar, we're going to place a link in the chat to the logon page for Foundant for anybody who doesn't already have access to that. You also, by the way, on our website at manyhandsdc.org, that link to Foundant and to preview the application is there as well. For anybody who can hear my dogs barking in the background, I do apologize. Okay, our applications will be accepted through Foundant only prior to the deadline. Once we pass that 11:59 p.m. on January 17th date, there will be, we will not be able to accept applications. All of our applications are going to be reviewed by our volunteer donor member committees. You can be certain that your application will receive careful and thoughtful consideration by a caring and committed group of women. Each year, each review committee's decisions reflect the unique perspectives that the members bring to Many Hands. So for this reason, applications that have not been successful in prior cycles may be successful in the current cycle. And so any organization that has applied before and not received a grant is encouraged to reapply. Our entire review process takes about 4 months, starting in January when applications are due, up through May when we award our grants. And at any point in the review process, you may be contacted by a Many Hands member for clarification or for additional information. Okay, so let me turn now to the grant application. We have one relative, well, significant-ish change to the application from prior applications that I'm going to highlight up top. And then I'm going to talk some more about just the basics of our application and our grant-making process. So first off, and this is particularly directed to the organizations who are joining us today and have applied before, we are changing how the focus area committee that you apply to is selected. So for all of you that applied in the past, you may recall that on your application, you checked off which focus area you wanted to apply to. We're changing that up this year, and instead of having the applicants choose their focus area, Many Hands is going to assign the focus area for you. I want to talk a little bit about the why, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the how. As for the why, we have noticed that over the years, many of our organizations have programming that spans multiple of our focus areas. Housing organizations may also provide job training skills, which is economic empowerment. Health organizations may overlap into economic empowerment, housing, and education. We see a lot of overlap, and because of that, we've noticed that many of our organizations really struggle in picking a focus area committee and kind of devote a lot of energy to that. And we've also seen some organizations try to tailor their application and spend some time tailoring their application to the focus area they're applying to. So you might have an organization that works both in health and economic empowerment, but they decide to apply in health and they shoehorn their application to the health committee, and it kind of doesn't give us the full breadth of everything they do and everything they serve. So what we want to do instead is just take your applications and group them by committee, and ensure that all like applications are grouped together, so that our focus area committees that review are seeing kind of all the similar applications in the same place, and kind of take that burden of trying to pick the best application off the applicant. So you will no longer see on the application a box that has you select your focus area committee. What we have added to the application instead is a set of boxes that describe a range of programming areas, maybe 10 or so, and you are supposed to check all of the programming areas that apply to your organization. So what we will do on our end is we will look at those responses and we will look at your mission and we will figure out what the best focus area committee is for your organization. So that's this year's change. We'll be doing the focus area selection for you, and your application will just ask you to check off the various areas in which you may provide programming. Okay. Now let me go to some basics about the Many Hands grant process. We provide at Many Hands only unrestricted funding. We do not fund for a particular program or a particular project or for a particular capital raise or anything like that. You are free to spend a Many Hands grant if you receive it for any purpose you choose. They don't need to be tied to a specific program or project. Because we provide unrestricted funding, you will see that the application places an emphasis on applicants and outcomes at the organization level. So in that respect, for those of you who have applied in the last year or two, the application is going to be very similar. But if you applied for an application grant back, I'm sorry, a Many Hands grant back in, say, 2019 and are coming back after a long hiatus, you will notice that the application no longer talks about specific programs or specific program outcomes and is instead looking at much more of an organizational level. Our grant application itself will be divided into 4 sections. The first section leads you through the Many Hands eligibility requirements. The second section asks for information about your organization as a whole and your leadership. Section 3 is where you will talk about your organization's work and the people you help in the communities you serve. And then the final section, the application requests that you upload financial information. So right now I'm going to talk about the Many Hands eligibility requirements. They can be found on our website. They are also linked in the application itself, and we urge you to review the requirements carefully before applying. We do not make any exceptions to our eligibility requirements. If an organization does not meet each of the eligibility requirements, they will be deemed ineligible for a Many Hands grant. For now, rather than go through all of the eligibility requirements, I'm going to highlight a few of the ones that tend to generate the most questions. And obviously, again, we have the Q&A for you to add any additional questions you might have. So a primary eligibility requirement for us is the audience to be served. We support organizations that serve women, children, and families in socioeconomic need. So people who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. We've been asked if there's a concrete definition for disadvantage, like do we use the federal poverty level or any scale? And we don't do that. We seek to help those that lack the basic resources or conditions that are necessary for well-being and equal participation in our communities. So if you have a education organization that maybe provides tutoring to primarily children in middle income brackets, that organization will not be eligible. We also frequently receive questions about organizations that serve both men and women and whether those organizations are eligible for funding. And the requirement is that an organization that serves primarily women, children, or families is eligible for funding, even if it also serves men. With respect to children and youth, if an organization serves children that are boys and girls, that organization is eligible because it serves primarily children. Um, so, so children, we don't look at gender, just to be clear about that. In the past, there have been organizations that perhaps have primarily served adult men, but have applied for Many Hands funding specifically for a program that serves only women. In prior years, before we started granting only unrestricted funding, that organization might have been eligible, but now it will not be. Now we will be looking at the organizational level to ensure that the organization serves primarily women, children, and families. Organizations that serve primarily adult men are not eligible. Your organization must have a currently active 501c3 status. If your 501c3 status is pending, you will not be eligible. Your organization must have an established budget of at least $500,000 and no more than $5 million. I want to quickly go through what financial information we require for the application this year. We are looking for your most recent Form 990. So for, I think, most applicants, that's going to be fiscal year 2023 for you. So it depends when your fiscal year end is, but the a June 30 fiscal year and 23, a December 31, 23 fiscal year. But with your 2023 Form 990, we're accepting these applications in 2025, so we'll want to see your fiscal year 2025 operating budget, including revenue and expenses. We will also want to see a fiscal year 2025 current budget to actual income statement and a balance sheet if that's available for your organization. Now, we know we're opening the application on January 2nd, so if your organization has a 12/31 year end, you are not going to have fiscal year 2025 financials in existence or available. So obviously that's optional for 12/31 organizations. However, if you're a June 30th organization, by January 2nd, you're about 6 months into your fiscal year. And so we would like to see fiscal year 25 income statement and balance sheet. We also want to see your fiscal year 2024 financial statements. If an audit or a financially reviewed financial statement is available for fiscal year 24, that is best. And that often is available for some of the June 30 or March 31 year end organizations. But if you only have internals because an audit or a financial review is not something you do or hasn't been completed, internal financials are acceptable. We also know, again, with a January 2nd application open date, if you have a 12/31 year end, you might not have your 12/31 financials done by then. So we just want the most recent fiscal year 24 financials you have done. In our experience, most 12/31 organizations at least have their third through 3 quarters, September 30 financials ready. So that will be fine. And these details are all spelled out in the application. One more technical thing for you. Our application platform, Foundant, only allows one upload per question, one document upload per question. So if you keep your income statement separate from your balance sheet, you will see in the application that you can upload your income statement first, and then there'll be a second optional upload if you have a second document to provide for us. Another eligibility requirement is that the applicant organization and the people it serves must be located in the Many Hands service area. We are largely an organization of local people serving to fund local organizations that serve the local DC area population. If your organization is affiliated with a larger regional organization or a national organization, we require that you have a local address, that you have an independent budget for the DC metro area, and that you have a local fiduciary board. If you have only a local advisory board and your fiduciary board is national, your organization will not be eligible to apply. Okay. So that's eligibility. I'm going to take you briefly through the rest of the application now, and then we'll take some questions. The second section of the application requests information about your organization's mission, its leadership, things like number of employees. We ask for an upload of your ED's resume or biography and a list of your board of directors and their primary affiliations. We ask for your to describe your organization's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if your organization has a DEI policy, we ask for it to be uploaded there. The third section of the application gets to kind of the heart of your proposal and your organization and its programming. I want to highlight for you at the very top of the third section, you're going to see a question asking for a funding request description. This is just a very brief title or name for your application. I think it's 100 characters or less. It's largely administrative. It's candidly, it's a section, it's a field in our grant management software, found it that we cannot get rid of. So it's there. We're just looking for a few words that summarize how a 2025 Many Hands grant would impact your organizational capacity. Below that, you're going to see those program area checkboxes I talked about earlier, that where you can check off the various kinds of programming you provide that will allow us to assign you the correct focus area. And then the remaining questions give you an opportunity to tell reviewers in some detail about your organization's purpose, your organization's programs, the people you serve, and your effectiveness. So that is, as I said, section 3 is really kind of the meat of the application. You will see that each of our questions has a maximum character count. That is because our grants management software requires us to assign a character limit to each question. So we've made those character limits generous so that you have as much space as you need to answer each question. However, it's a limit, but it's not a goal. You should not, if it says you can have 5,000 characters or 5,000 words, you don't have to write that much. We just wanted to make sure that you had as much space as you needed. We appreciate it when we get straightforward and direct responses to the questions. So just answer it as best you can. If you are well under the character limits, don't stress it out. As I said, it's a ceiling, it is not a goal. We have bullet points in some of our questions, 2 or 3 specific bullet points we want you to answer. Please do be sure to cover the information requested in those bullet points. And we ask that you try to use plain language that's free of jargon or undefined acronyms. We are volunteer reviewers that look at applications across a huge span of areas. So acronyms that may be completely familiar to you and almost second nature might not be as familiar to us. And then the final section of the application, section 4, asks applicants to upload the financial information that I listed earlier. I know I went through that pretty quickly, but as I mentioned, it is spelled out in pretty careful detail on the application. So that's all of the matters I wanted to address up front, but at this point we are open for Q&A. So I'm going to ask Susan to unmute herself, which I think she has. And Susan is going to read out the questions that we have. If you continue to add questions to the Q&A as they come up.
Catherine, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. I think it would be helpful for people to clarify a couple of the requirements for eligibility.
Sure.
You have gone through them. You have gone through some of this already, and the questions may have been written and submitted before you actually covered the material. So forgive us if it's repetition, but there are a number of questions about national organizations sponsoring DC programs, and I think we need to clarify the requirement for a DC board or with fiduciary responsibility as opposed to just a national board with a program being run in DC. There are a couple of questions about that.
Yeah. Okay, great. And actually, I do think that the way Susan phrased the question nicely encapsulated the program, who may or may not be eligible. If you are a national organization or even a regional organization, say based out of Richmond that covers the entire Southeast, and you are just running a specific program out of DC, you will not be eligible because we are funding on an organizational basis, not a programmatic basis, local organizations. So the requirement is that the applicant organization have an office in DC, have an independent budget for its DC area operations, and have a fiduciary governing board dedicated to its DC area operations. So if you just have a national board or a regional board and no fiduciary board in the DC area, or maybe have an advisory board in the DC area, but your fiduciary board is national, that organization is not eligible. We are really looking for local organizations serving our local population. So you may have a kind of national umbrella organization under which there are lots of local and individual organizations that have kind of not affiliates that have their own EIN, their own DC board, their own DC governance, their own DC budgets and offices, for example. Those organizations are the ones that are eligible. Susan, if you think that was clear enough, that's great. And if you think I need some follow-up, let
I
me
would
know.
just add, I think we just need to clarify when we say DC, sometimes we are using that as a shorthand. We're
Sure.
talking about the DC area. There are a few questions about whether organizations that serve Prince George's County
Sure.
or that serve Alexandria are
Okay.
eligible,
Okay.
and they are. So we should
They are.
clarify that.
Yeah, so when our service area, let's do that. I probably should have said that earlier. Our service area covers DC proper, um, Arlington County, Fairfax County, including the separately incorporated cities of Alexandria, Falls Church, and Fairfax City. It includes Montgomery County and it includes Prince George's County. So that is the many hands service area. And we are looking for organizations that are based in our service area, serve our service area, and have a fiduciary board that governs that service area. I've been using DC area as a little bit of shorthand, but that is our service area. And we want to see an office in the service area, an independent board in the service area, and a budget directed just to this service area.
Okay. There is a question about the percentage of the what percentage of the population served have to be socioeconomically disadvantaged?
Most of it. So we're really looking for our grants to serve people in socioeconomic need. So if you are an organization that serves mostly middle or upper class children, but has a specific smaller program for kids in socioeconomic need, that organization will not be eligible. On the other hand, if you know that in your organization 80% of the kids qualify for assisted lunch or something like that, and there may be a few others who don't, that organization will be eligible. So for socioeconomic need, it needs to be a kind of substantial majority of the population served.
And again, an eligibility question, must the organization have a specific mission to serve women and families, or the request goes only to a project or program that would serve women and families?
The organization's overall programming must serve mostly women, children, and families in socioeconomic need. So it can't be just one specific program that serves people in socioeconomic need or serves, for example, women or children.
Okay, we're going, I'm sorry, it's hard to organize as the questions come in, and there
No
is a bit of
worries.
repetition and clarification, but does the organization that is part of a multi-state organization, must it have its own EIN in order to apply?
So there's not a requirement that it have its own EIN. However, it does, if you're part of a multi-state organization, you are going to need the independent fiduciary board that is responsible for the operations within the many hands service area. In my experience looking at it, that almost always means that the local organization has its own EIN, but we don't look for the EIN, but we are going to be looking for a fiduciary board and a budget, and an office, obviously, within the many hands service area, governing the many hands service area.
Okay, we have a question about eligibility requirements regarding religious institutions.
Sure.
A Catholic school exclusively serving low-income students tuition free, but the students are not required to be Catholic, but they do teach religion. Does this exclude this organization from eligibility?
The answer is probably, but the requirement is that the organization needs to be secular in its mission and its programming. So we will look both at the organization's mission and at the organization's programming. The way this is described, it sounds like the programming is not religious, although I couldn't tell you just based on this question whether the religion is taught or in any way within the school. Many Catholic schools don't require the students to be Catholic, but do teach religion, so that would be a programming thing. And then also, we'd have to look at the mission. So I say probably because in most cases, when religious schools have applied, the mission tends to be religious and or there tends to be some element of religious programming. So but that's the requirement, is that it be secular in mission and in programming, and that's what we're going to look at.
I think we need a little, excuse me, a little more clarification on the operating budget minimum requirement of $500,000. There are a couple of questions about organizations that are planning on an operating budget, but may not have specifically had an operating budget of 500,000 that is reflected on previous years' 990s. And they would like some clarification about what that limit, how firm, excuse me, how firm that limit really is.
So what we're looking for on the minimum side is an established operating budget of 500,000. That means for the fiscal year in which you're applying, which would be 2025, your expenses are are budgeted to be $500,000 or more. And then by established, we would like to see some history of having an operating budget of $500,000. So normally it's the year prior, you've also been at that $500,000 in expense threshold. There's potentially a little bit of flexibility in the prior year. If you were at $490,000 in fiscal year 2024 and you're at 550 for 2025, that would be fine. But if an organization was, say, at $300,000 in 2024 and are hoping to hit, 500,000 in 2025, that would not be an established operating budget of 500,000. They would be deemed ineligible for this year, but we would encourage you, if you do hit that 500,000 in 2025, to apply for the next grant cycle with that established budget.
Okay. There's a question about submitting a proposal from a partnership of multiple DC nonprofits, a collective of 5 youth-serving DC nonprofits, and they are hoping to apply collectively for a grant to support collective programming. Would that be permissible?
We're not really set up for that. What you could do is choose a lead organization to submit the application. And then in your section 3, in the meat of it, talk about the collective, but that lead organization would need to, on its own, meet all of our eligibility requirements, we would not be kind of cobbling together the eligibility requirements from 5 different organizations to get there.
Okay. There's a question about how we define youth. Um, and is that inclusive of ages 18 to 25 as defined by many organizations? And
Yes,
I
it
know
is.
the Q&As
Yes.
do spell that out some. So
Yeah, the youth is 18 to 25, and also I think I started to say this before, but didn't. If you are serving youth and your youth are both genders, that will be eligible. So it's really all children, all youth, all women, and really it's just adult men that are not part of our focus.
okay, if the board is based in Baltimore, but the work is based in Prince George's County, is the organization eligible?
It is not. Baltimore is
Okay,
outside of service area.
yeah. Um, there is a request from someone, an organization that has applied before, as to whether or not they would be able to have access to the feedback and to suggestions. So I think we should clarify how we deal with what happens when people do not succeed in getting a grant.
Yeah, so generally we do not provide any kind of feedback or suggestions from our focus area committees about what could be improved or could help your chances the next year, in large part because, as I mentioned, we're a volunteer-led organization. We have different volunteers on each committee every year, and so we do not, from a review process, have kind of a strict rubric where we score things, and we could tell you you scored a 9 here, but you were a 6 over here, and so get that 6 up. Our process is kind of much more holistic and driven by volunteers who don't necessarily repeat. So what one year's committee may think might help you in the future um, might not actually be what the next year's committee thinks. Um, so the only place where we really provide kind of more feedback and direct answers is really in this eligibility review process. If you've been deemed ineligible, then we would explain to you what it was, and then you would be able to see, might I be eligible in a later year. But if you made it to the focus area committee process, there's not going to be any kind of feedback that says, if you do this next year, that will improve your chances.
Okay. There's a question about nonprofit status that comes through fiscal sponsorship.
So fiscally sponsored organizations are typically not eligible because the structure, as I've always seen it, and I think this might be even be the legal IRS requirements, is the fiscally sponsored organization will not have a fiduciary board. It will only have an advisory board. So if the question is, we have 501c3 status through a fiscal sponsor, does that count for 501c3 status? The answer to that is yes. But I suspect your organization's board is an advisory board and not a fiduciary board, and that would make your organization ineligible. So we occasionally see an organization that, for example, might have started off getting its 50 affiliated with a religious organization, and it's got its 501c3 as an affiliate organization, has since spun off with its own EIN and is operating independently. That organization's eligible because it has 501c3 status. And so for a fiscally sponsored organization, you'd have the status, but if you have an advisory board and the fiduciary board is with the fiscal sponsor, you're not going to be eligible for that reason.
Okay, there's a question, have past grantees been a part of grant selection committees of many hands?
No, not as such. It's something we've actually talked about a little bit, but it's not. It is not that our grant selection process will include people who are past grantees. We have definitely had people who were especially on boards of prior grantees or prior applicants who joined us having learned about us because their organization received a site visit or a grant from Many Hands. So those people might be part of your review committee, but your review committee will not necessarily include somebody there as in their prior grantee status. A lot of that has to do with the fact that a prior grantee, if they received a partner grant, is generally eligible to apply again.
We also have, Catherine, I think it's worth mentioning that we have a conflicts policy
Sure.
for people who are making these decisions so that they don't make decisions about anything that they have any kind of connection or responsibility for.
Right. If you are on the board of, employed by, or have a family member that's on the board of or employed by any applicant organization, you cannot be part of a committee reviewing the application or have any say in whether or not that organization reviews a grant. That Susan's right about to add that point.
Okay, and just a little clarification about the question of the connection between a potential grantee and the Catholic school.
Mhm.
If this potential grantee does teach religion class, are they
Mhm.
automatically ineligible?
Almost certainly. This might be one where the potential applicant should email us at grants@manyhandsdc.org. And so we could kind of look at the mission and the programming, but I'm having a hard time thinking about how teaching if the programming includes religion classes, how the organization would be eligible. So that's almost certainly a no. I just without having seen the scope of the programming, I don't want to definitively say that, but I think that's where that ends up shaking out.
Okay. And then one of the questions is encouraging us to provide a little more information about what kind of work stands out to Many Hands as exciting to fund. How
Oh,
our
yeah.
so I'm going to leave that one to you.
Yeah, Susan's leaving that to me because it's kind of there's no right answer. The kind of work we're looking for is work that is impactful in our communities, um, and aligned with our mission of serving women, children, and families in socioeconomic need. Um, we have, if you go to our website and look at all the different organizations we have funded over the years, there's not necessarily any kind of theme or rhyme or reason running through their programming because it's really an individualized look that we give. Some of the organizations serve a wide range of people. Some of the organizations provide very concentrated services to a few. There's all kinds of programming. It's just really a combination of the kind of programming you use, your governance, your effectiveness, and the impact you're having in your community, be it kind of deep or be it wide. So I know that you would all love it if we could say if you can hit these three check boxes, you're 80% of the way there. Unfortunately, we can't. It's going to be much more of a holistic review, which is why Susan laughed and punted that right back to me.
I want to make sure that I've covered all of the questions I believe I have. If I have missed a question that someone has put into the Q&A, would you please flag that, put the question back in the Q&A again, or somehow let me know?
Yeah, in the meantime, while Susan's looking to see if anything else comes in the Q&A,
Yeah, universities. That's yeah,
I'm
our
going to post into the
universities.
chat. So hold up for me, Susan. I have just posted into the chat, the log on to our Foundant Grants Management System. If you click that link, you should get to the log on. You'll see a button to create a new account. If you don't have an account associated with your email, and there's a blue forgot your password link before that if you have been on in a prior year and don't remember your password. So that's the administrative thing. Susan. Yep.
Okay. Uh, three more clarifications.
Sure.
Average amount of grant and reporting requirements.
Yep.
And the
I'll do that
second,
first.
okay, do that one.
Let me
And
do
then
that first. We always give a $100,000 impact grant every year. That's kind of been our hallmark grant since our founding in 2004. And then three partner grants. Those are dependent on each year's fundraising. Generally, the last, I would say, since 2020, they've been between $60,000 and $70,000. Last year was 69,000. This year's will depend on how much money we are able to raise from our donors between now and mid-May.
okay.
Oh, wait,
Another
you asked
question.
reporting requirements. I did not answer, sorry. Um, we do not have kind of traditional formal reporting requirements. We do ask that about a year after the grant, we check in with the organization to see what the organization is doing. We could do an interview. We would take a video Q&A. If you have an annual report, you can send that over to us. We can send you a template. So we do have 1 year out check-in to see what you're doing and help our members see what you're doing, because our members always want to see what our grantees are doing, but that can take any kind of format that's best for the organization. But that's pretty much it for our so-called reporting requirements.
Okay, are universities eligible to submit an application?
Generally, universities are not going to be eligible because their budget's going to be too big.
Right.
I'm also going to guess they don't primarily serve women, children, and families in socioeconomic need. We have had universities apply for a particular program within the university, but they're submitting a 990 with a budget in the hundreds of millions, so they wouldn't be eligible.
Okay, and a related question, which we have discussed before, but just to sort of nail specifically again, do organizations need to have a specific mission to serve women and families? Could the grant request be specific to a program or a project that serves women and families, but not through an organization with a specific mission?
The
And
mission itself doesn't have to mention women and families, but the mission of the organization's programming as a whole must serve women, children, and families in socioeconomic need. So if you as a whole, as an organization, serve primarily middle class and wealthy citizens or serve primarily adult men, and you're looking just for a specific program that serves many hands target population, that will not be eligible. So we're looking at the programming as a whole, not a specific program, because we provide unrestricted funding, we won't tell you to target your funding to a particular program. When we give a grant, it's up to the organization how to best spend it to advance their mission and their programming.
okay, this is another specific question, and my guess, I'm going to suggest again that if people do have these kinds of specific questions, sending emails may get clarification. Sending emails to the email address you mentioned, and maybe you can mention again, Catherine, may give people the clarification. A DC nonprofit that focuses on providing basic needs to impoverished families in Ward 6, 70 to 85% are women and children. Is this the range Many Hands is looking to fund?
Um, so those stats alone on those stats alone, that organization would be eligible on the population piece, because I heard, was it 70 or 80%?
70 to 85% are women and children
Are women
at
and
any given
children,
point.
right? And
Yeah.
and the whole focus is families. It's women, children, and families. So it's families, and it sounds impoverished, sounds to me. So that sounds socioeconomic need. So that would meet our target population. Um, the head you're hearing from me is, I don't know your budget. I don't know how long you've been operating and those kinds of things. But if that question is just about target population, that organization does serve our target population. And that's exactly what we mean by, if you serve some adult men, but mostly women and children, you are eligible. I also
Okay.
popped our email address, except for I typed it wrong. I always do this. Like every year on our applicant call, I mistype our manyhandsdc.org. So I am now in the chat on my second try putting in our email address. It is grants, plural, @manyhandsdc.org.
Great. The portal, there is a question about the timing. The portal opens on January 2nd. But as Catherine said, you can take a look at to get a preview of the application starting now. Yes.
Yeah, the portal's up. You will see the landing page for our application and you can review a preview. What you cannot do is actually go in and fill out the application now. You can collect the information you need and the documents. We also, if you read the semi-exhaustive facts on our website, we always recommend that you draft the application in a separate word processing program like Word and cut and paste your answers into the application. It's kind of the easiest way to work within it and not lose your work. So you can start drafting your answers now if you want to. It's just the application is not actually open to be filled out and submitted until January 2nd.
There is also a question about the kind of style we prefer in the applications, formal or creative writing type. And I think the answer to that is whatever works for the organization. There's no template of what we want to have you write. As long as you tell us the information that we need, we'll be able to plow through all of the different kinds of styles that come in, and many do. So there's no specific requirement for that. And what appears to be the last question right now, does socioeconomic disadvantage have to be financial need? What if we serve socially disadvantaged populations that also have barriers to financial access due to social disadvantages? I'm not totally sure what that question is asking, but
Yeah, I can't answer that in the abstract. I can kind of reiterate that we're looking to serve people in socioeconomic need, and that normally is lacking the financial resources to be a full participant in society. So the way your question's phrased sounds like maybe that is what your organization does, but the way that's phrased, I can't answer the question. I would encourage you to look at our website, look at our eligibility requirements, and if you want to email something a little more specific to us, we will do our best to answer it. We do try to kind of answer generic eligibility questions without forcing you to write an entire application and discover you're ineligible. Sometimes, however, until we see kind of the full information provided, we don't know the answer.
that looks to be the last question. Let me make sure. Yeah, that's the last question. I believe we have answered everything, unless someone wants to put back in the chat something we didn't answer.
And I'm looking too. It doesn't look like we have anything new. Okay, so then to wrap up, I want to thank everybody again for their interest in Many Hands and for your time today. Direct you again to our website, manyhandsdc.org. You will see our eligibility requirements. There's also a frequently asked questions section that hits questions we're asked about eligibility, about what we're looking for in the application, technical questions about the Foundant platform. It's a really great resource. So if you have specific questions, I encourage you to look first. I will confess, sometimes I look at them before answering a question I receive. We have provided our email, grants@manyhandsdc.org. If you have a very specific thing that you want to ask us, we do our best to answer your questions, but as I said, sometimes we just need to look at there's too much in the abstract and we would need to look at the application to fully answer it. We will be posting this recording on the website within the next few days, and the application is due on January 17th at 11:59 p.m. We thank you all for your interest and thanks for joining today. With that, I am going to close down this webinar.